apparently the extension of the Trump tax cuts isn't quite the sure thing the Trump administration thought it would be. Here's what's happening. Because Trump doesn't have a supermajority in either the House or the Senate, he's looking to extend his tax cuts for another 8 years under budget reconciliation. That would allow him to do so with a simple majority in the House and Senate. Their hope had been to get this done as part of a big, beautiful bill that includes military and border expenditures prior to Memorial Day in May. But all that has run into a bit of a snag. The Congressional Budget Office has determined that extending the Trump tax cuts would cost America $4.6 trillion over 8 years. And according to current law, these tax extensions have to be deficit neutral, meaning Republicans would need to either cut spending elsewhere or raise revenue to help pay for it. All this is under what budget rules call the current law baseline, which means they assume the tax cuts will expire as scheduled. So if you want to extend them, it counts as new spending. But some Republicans want to switch to the current policy baseline, which assumes the tax cuts stay in place forever. And if they're already assumed to exist, extending them would cost $0. Problem solved, right? Well, not everyone agrees. Democrats are calling this skirting of parliamentary rules magic math and a partisan gimmick. They argue this change would break with decades of precedent and violate the 1974 budget law that governs how Congress uses budget reconciliation. That's why all eyes are now on the Senate parliamentarian, the referee, who interprets the chamber's rules. Her name is Elizabeth McDonough, and she has been the Senate parliamentarian since 2012 when she was appointed by Senator Harry Reid. That's right, Elizabeth McDonough is a Democrat. So the Republicans will not have a lackey just towing the party line when it comes to interpreting budget rules. In fact, Sarah McDonough was the one who guided the Senate through the first and second impeachment trials of Donald Trump. Now keep in mind that the Senate parliamentarian can be overruled by the President of the Senate, Vice President J.D. Vance. However, if he did so, it would risk a vote from the full Senate. And if 60 senators disagree, the ruling can be overturned. Keep in mind that the Senate parliamentarian has not been overruled since 1975 when Vice President Rockefeller did so briefly and faced strong backlash because of it. Historically, most vice presidents have followed the Senate parliamentarian's advice in order to maintain procedural legitimacy. If the Senate parliamentarian does rule in favor of the Republicans, it will end up adding $4.6 trillion to the national debt over the next 8 years, bringing the national debt to a staggering $60 trillion by 2035. If the parliamentarian rules against it, Republicans would have to find $4.6 trillion in cuts over the next 8 years to plug the hole in the budget created by the extension of the Trump tax cuts. So what does all this mean for you? Well, if you are one of those people who is planning on taking advantage of the Trump tax cuts to execute your Roth conversion strategy over the next 9 years between now and 2034, then you may just have to push the pause button for a few more days. You may want to wait until you hear the ruling from the Senate parliamentarian before you set anything in motion. Remember, if the Trump tax cuts expire, tax rates will revert back to what they were in 2017, which means it will be that much more expensive to reposition your highly taxable 401ks and IRAs to tax-free. The good news is that the national debt would be much closer to $55 trillion come 2035. So while this will not have solved the national debt crisis, it will have slowed it down, if only marginally. If the Senate parliamentarian does rule in favor of the Republicans, it means you'll have a full 9 years, including 2025, in which to take advantage of historically low tax rates. You'll especially want to keep your eye on the 24% tax bracket. Remember, the current 24% bracket is still lower than the future version of the 22, which is 25. And the 24% bracket allows you to convert all the way up to $394,600 of taxable income, and it only costs you 2% more on the margin. The 24% bracket truly is the sweet spot in the Trump tax cuts, and if they get extended for another 8 years, it's a golden opportunity to protect huge portions of your retirement savings from the impact of higher taxes down the road. Remember, when it comes to Roth conversions, you want to shift your money slowly enough that you don't rise into a tax bracket that gives you heartburn, but quickly enough that you get all the heavy lifting done before tax rates go up for good. You want to stretch that tax obligation out over as many years as possible. And that's precisely what an extension of the Trump tax cuts would allow you to do. So for those of you who are interested in the future of tax rates and how that may impact your Roth conversion strategy, keep your ear to the ground for the upcoming ruling from Senate parliamentarian Elizabeth McDonough. I'm David McKnight. Thanks for watching.